We do so much good things in our company. The product that we buy is some of the best. Like, we buy prime steak tips. We don't shout that from the rooftops. There are things that we do that we know we are better than the competitors. So we're going to have a whole campaign this year and next year around "We Are Better." We own the domain name, and we're gonna train our staff to tell customers, to share with customers. We're gonna have obviously things on the table. We're gonna have things that are menu driven, things on the web, but really get down to the nitty gritty to explain to our customers. Did you know that we buy our roasted coffee from Dover, New Hampshire? It's a local company in Dover. Did you know that we have a greenhouse in Salem, New Hampshire that our produce supplier built specifically for us to grow lettuce and cilantro and parsley, and those are the kinds of things that we know internally, and we're going to start shouting it from the rooftops that we are better, because the chains can't do that. They can't.
This episode made possible by Restaurant Systems Pro. With excitement, allow me to introduce to you today's guest, CEO of Great New Hampshire Restaurants, Tom Boucher. My man, Tom, are you feeling unstoppable today?
I do now.
Yeah, man. You were an amazing first episode. This is the second time we had you on the show. You were on the show the first time back in February. Get this, 11th, 2015. Today is the 11th of February, exactly 10 years ago.
Are you kidding me?
Isn't that crazy? That was 10 years ago? Decade.
I had no idea it was the same date.
I figured it out this morning.
Today's my birthday.
Is it really?
Yeah.
You're making time for me on your birthday, man? Happy birthday. Wow, that's wild. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Well, I like I said, it was an amazing first episode. We have a whole new format to take you through today. Back then, you were at 5 T-bones, 2 Cactus Jacks, and 1 copper door. So I'm sure things have changed since then. Before we dive into where you are today, let's get that motivational, inspirational ball rolling with a success quote or mantra. What do you got for us?
So it's interesting. I think before we got on talking here, you used the word perfection. And one of the things that I teach my team is it's the restaurant industry. You're never going to be perfect, but we strive to be excellent. Yes. So there's a very small distinction between those two, but it helps put things in perspective for them so that they're not striving to be exactly perfect. And it's important because you make mistakes in the industry. It's going to happen. Yeah. We're humans, right? And I try to tell them that, we serve something like 2 million people a year. And even if we're correct 99.9% of the time, that's still roughly 2 tables every day that we missed the mark on. It's just numbers. It's just the way it is. And so it helps them. I think it helps them feel like, you know what, I am doing a pretty darn good job. I'm not perfect, but I'm doing excellent.
Yeah, and I think the other important thing too is that excellence is relative. What's excellent for one restaurant or one demographic of guests isn't necessarily excellent for the other demographic. So we always are comparing ourselves and holding ourselves comparable to other organizations. But I mean, at the end of the day, like, who are we and what is our form of excellence and who are we trying to serve? And just, I think giving yourself that wiggle room instead of like defining perfection and aiming for that goes a long way.
Yeah, and I think it helps give people a little bit of comfort knowing that their hand's not going to get chopped off because they made one mistake. It's just life.
Yeah. Great way to get this thing started. So like I said, 5 T-bones, 2 Cactus Jacks, 1 copper door in 2015. That was episode 108 if you want to check it out. The show has changed a lot since then, but I mean, it was a great episode. This is episode 1161.
Wow.
Just for a little bit of
Good
context there. Thank you very much. Where are you today? Paint the picture of like what Great New Hampshire Restaurants looks like today.
So we now have 6 T-bones, 2 copper doors still.
Okay. I think, were you at 1 in 2015?
Yep.
Okay, so 2 now.
Yep. And we're in the original here in Bedford, New Hampshire, and the second one's in Salem. And we opened Concord T-bones. Get ready for this. We opened Concord T-bones at the beginning of the pandemic.
Wow. I'm sure there's a story there.
Oh, man. I can't even. It's just, it was one of those things where we already had the steel up. We already had, we as they would say, we were already pregnant, right? Yeah. Like, what are you going to do? Stop building and not do it? We were supposed to open in May of 2020. And it got delayed, obviously, because of the pandemic, which we got shut down on St. Patrick's Day of 2020. And we kept moving forward. Like, we have to keep building. And fortunately, construction was still a necessary industry. I think that's what they called it.
Right.
But we didn't open in May because the manufacturers that were creating the booths were shut down. So we didn't get open until late August of 2020.
Wow.
And fortunately, and this is something that I'm happy to share with your viewers and listeners, get a relationship with a good community bank. Because if we had a larger bank, they would have said, sorry, you better start paying us. That's the way it is. But we have a great local community bank that said, you can start paying us when you get open.
Where in New Hampshire? What's the bank you're working with?
Primary Bank. They're right here in Bedford, New Hampshire.
Well, shout out.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love
and
that.
then they've been amazing. They're an amazing, I call them a partner. They're amazing partners.
Yeah, I love that. And I'm curious, because you had the Great New Hampshire Restaurants group, were you able to get, like, because you have restaurants established, were you able to get support, like PP, like the,
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
So,
we did both rounds of PPP.
because I know if you opened a certain period, like, you weren't privy to that cash flow.
The Concord T-Bones did get the second round of PPP.
Okay.
They did not get the first round.
Because if you're using the greater restaurant group with all those
Yeah.
employees, I was assuming there'd probably be. I know a lot of people that opened like months within the pandemic and they didn't get any government support, which just buried them. It was hard. But Cactus Jack's, those closed.
So we actually just closed the original
Okay.
in Manchester, and that was at the end of 23.
Okay.
And that was the first restaurant that I co-founded. And
Yeah.
there was a number of reasons why the demographics in Manchester had changed dramatically. There was tremendous competition that opened. And the street that we were on really transitioned. We were basically the only casual dining left on that street.
Okay.
It turned into all fast food, Chipotle, Panera, Popeyes.
Right.
And lo and behold, and it was a blessing, because we were working really hard to keep the numbers up there. And no matter what we did, we were this close to doing another giant renovation, which was going to cost us north of $750,000. And somebody was looking down on us, and lo and behold, Raising Cane's came along.
Oh.
And
Yeah, they're coming through this area.
they came along and they wanted our site. We were the tenant. We were not the landlord. And but by rights, the landlord had to buy out our lease. So they bought out our lease for something that we negotiated together. And Raising Cane's came in. They knocked it down, and Cane's is supposed to open next month.
Awesome.
So it honestly, it worked out really good for us. And I'll share a couple of things about closing a restaurant.
Yeah, we have a lot to unpackage today. I can't wait to get into it.
Most restaurants, when they close unexpectedly, most of them just lock the doors and walk away, and the employees never find out. And there's a reason for that. A lot of people are like, well, the reason is it's hard to tell your employees that you're going to close in 3 months, because what's going to happen?
You're not going to show
They're all
up.
going to leave. They're
Yeah.
all going to go find another job. Well, I was very, very uneasy about that, and I wanted to be as truthful and as transparent to our employees as we could without harming the business. And so I had an all-store meeting, and I told them what was going on, that everything that I just shared with you. And I said, we're going to stay open until December 23rd. And we're going to transfer all of you to our existing restaurants. So there was at the time 55 employees, and we told them if you stay with us till December 23rd, you're going to get a certain amount of bonus.
Yeah.
And when you transfer to one of our other restaurants, you'll get that bonus again if you stay with that restaurant for 6 months.
Nice.
And I'm happy to say 95% stayed with us to the end, and 90% stayed with us the additional 6 months.
That's awesome.
So and I'll remind you, that was also it was a time period where we're still struggling in some capacity to find enough employees. So this was a great backfill for us.
Right.
So
yeah, and I know that was a big part of our first conversation, is that you really strive to take care of the employee first. You create opportunity from within, and the industry over the past 10 years there's a lot of change has happened, and now even the best of the best are struggling to find people. And I was curious if that was something that was a reality for you too.
It was in the pandemic was like 2021, 22 for me. Like
Right.
those 3 years are all kind of compressed. And I believe it was the summer of 21 or 22. I can't remember. But we were struggling to find employees. Every restaurant in the entire country was.
Right.
And it was the first time in our, at the time, 38 years that we shut down the restaurants on Mondays for about 10 weeks.
Wow.
Because we were burning out staff, and so we just made the decision. You know, it hurt the bottom line, but in the long run, it was the right move. And now we're back to full staff, and we have as many applications coming in now as we did back in 18 and 19.
Got it. So where you're at today, just to summarize, 6 T-bones.
T-bones, yeah.
2 copper
door,
doors.
yep.
One up in the one location
Yep.
there. You closed the original Cactus Jack.
Yep.
And do you still have one?
We have
location?
one up in Laconia, yeah.
Got it. So all together, you have one more total unit than
Yep.
before.
Yep.
So 6, 2, and 1. So a lot to unpackage. I mean, if you go back to the episode 108, we kind of talk about how you got into the industry. I'll just kind of summarize it real quick. Basically, you were working at T-Bones, you were a busboy, server, and they approached you for management, and then you kind of continued to rise up the chain and equity partner, bought out your partners. It's kind of what we learned the first time. I mean, going through that evolution, the one thing I've learned is that the best restaurateurs create opportunity from within. And I think that's something that happened for you. So let's just kind of pick up there when
Sure.
like, they started when they approached you and you said, hey, like, you know, like where does it make sense to kind of start, I guess.
So that's a real underpinning of our entire culture, is that we promote from within. We're very proud of that.
Yeah.
One of our 7 core values is called made from scratch, and it means made from scratch food, obviously, but we're also very proud that we make from scratch leaders in our company. And of the 8 of us on the leadership team, there's only one that didn't work in the restaurants, and she's our controller, so she's finance. But the rest all started at very entry-level positions, whether it was a bartender or a line cook, etc. And I'm very proud of that. And if you add up the total number of years all of us have been with the company, it's north of 250 years.
Wow.
And all of them are owners in the company too.
Wow.
So it's a really great team, and we rely on each other, we trust each other, and even though I'm the CEO, we all look at each other as having our own roles, and we truly trust that everybody's doing what they're supposed to do.
Of the, you know, from the time you've been here and the people who are now on your executive team, how many of those people have been here since the time you were here?
So all but 2.
Wow.
Yeah, we just celebrated 40 years last November.
You said one of those core values was we grow our people from, say it again, grow the core values.
Made from scratch.
Made from scratch.
Yeah.
What are those 7 core values? Putting you on the spot here.
Yeah, you are. So executing greatness, that's part of the T-Bone's Great American Eatery and Great New Hampshire Restaurants.
Got it.
Again, it's not perfection, right?
Yeah. It's great. I love it.
Care and understanding, which relates to how we treat our employees and our guests. Made from scratch. Made from scratch is, of course, how we make our food. And as I mentioned, it's how we grow our people to leadership roles. Trust and entrust, and we talked about that with the leadership team. We trust each other, and we entrust our general managers to run the stores as we would. Teamwork, we just added that one. We actually asked our employees how much they liked our 6 core values at the time. And we said, do you think we're missing one? And they all came back. It was overwhelming that they said we need teamwork, because that's something that we walk and talk every single day. And the last one, it's probably my favorite because I advocated for this really hard, is courage. And the courage piece is, and this is why I was talking about it with a colleague of mine this morning, the leadership team, for example, we have the courage to stand up and disagree and not have it hang over us and drag it with us. I get challenged often by the leadership team, and they have the courage to say, hey, Tom, I don't think that's the right direction. And we work through it, and sometimes it's a TBD. You know what TBD stands for?
To be determined.
No, sometimes it's a Tom Boucher decision. Okay. And we joke about that.
And that's
too.
why you need an executive.
Yeah,
sometimes you need that person.
And we joke about that. Like,
yeah.
Sometimes if it's something small and we're not agreeing, and then someone will say, all right, Tom, TBD it.
Yeah.
You know,
the deal breaker,
Yeah.
or the vote, whatever,
Right.
the shift the vote. I mean, but you're making me think of Tom Walter, who I had on the show, and he wrote this book, It's My Company Too. And in that book, he talked about the importance of an entangled organization where everybody can make that executive decision or feel like they can challenge the CEO, whether you're the dishwasher or the DOO. Like, you can challenge the CEO on a way to do something, courage. But you have to create that culture. You have to open that channel of communication and let it be known that those channels are open. And that's in the language that you choose.
Yes.
So courage.
Yes.
Yeah.
And you just reminded me of something that I think gives all the way to the frontline employee level the courage to make certain decisions. We have something called our three-legged stool approach to decision making. And every decision, I don't care how small it is to how big it is, it has to work for the employee, it has to work for the guest, it has to work for the company. And all three have to be balanced. You have to think about all three of those legs of the stool. And I tell especially younger managers, you will never make a bad decision as long as you keep that in the forefront of your mind. You'll never get any kind of pushback. If you can say, I did this because it worked for the guest, worked for the company, and it worked for the employee, you win. Like that, you did great. Even though it may have not turned out the way you wanted, as long as you had that as your guiding principle, good for you.
I love that. So, I mean, the other thing too, just reading between the lines, it sounds like these core values are also constantly evolving, because it sounds like there was a meeting that just happened where you're bringing your team in on developing the core values. So now they own a piece of it.
Yes.
It's not like you telling them, here are our values.
Right.
It's like, here, what are our values?
As a matter of fact, our 6 core values at the time were developed probably more than 10 years ago. Over a 2-day period, we had a facilitator come in. We brought in every single general manager in our company, of course, the leadership team, and the facilitator. And we sat for 2 days and talked and really worked through what's the most important core values of our company. And it was a really fascinating 2 days because, as you can imagine, everybody had their different opinions.
Right.
But it really made us work hard to think about the words that we're going to walk, because I didn't want to just have something on paper and have it just be like, this is what our core values are.
And that's what you see all the time. People are like, oh, we need core values. Well, which ones are the most common? Let's just take those ones and we'll put them in the operations manual.
So, right. And I see it. I see it in every single action that happens at the store level. I see them using those words when they're talking to employees, or we have something. My mind's going a million miles a minute here.
Let it fly, brother.
I'm telling you, one thing that we did. We're coming up on 2 years. It was probably one of the best things we've done culturally for our company. We hired a company called Motivosity.
Was this recent?
It'll be 2 years this July.
Okay.
So it's an online platform. It's an app or desktop.
We're already getting into the technology. I love it.
Oh, it's
Motivosity?
Motivosity. So it's basically a reward system that allows peer-to-peer recognition of employees, and not only peer-to-peer, but frontline recognizing managers, and then of course managers recognizing employees. And the way it works is we fill each employee's account with a certain dollar amount based on your position. Frontline employees get a certain amount, managers get more, GMs get more, and of course the leadership team gets more. And it works kind of like Facebook, where it's got a scrolling type platform or feel to it. And so I'm going to recognize Eric today. But for what reason am I recognizing him? It has to be tied to one of the 7 core values.
Love that.
And we went through this, and we couldn't think of any example where you would recognize someone where it didn't fall into one of those 7 core values. So it was perfect.
Yeah.
It's been amazing. We have a 95% engagement level for our employees. 95% are on that platform. Probably not daily, but at least a couple of times a week. And you think about this, and your listeners are gonna feel this and hear it loud and clear. When was the last time you had a line cook go over to a dishwasher and say, "Good job tonight"?
I mean, not often enough.
Not often.
Yeah.
This allows them to do it in a way that says, "Hey, Johnny, I'm going to recognize you publicly in front of the entire company. I'm going to reward you with $2, $4, $3. You can pick a dollar amount." And it's not the dollar amount. It is in some cases, but it's more the public recognition of a seasoned line cook recognizing Johnny the dishwasher publicly on how he kicked butt tonight.
Yeah.
That just never happened before. And so I'm delighted to see the engagement. I love reading people recognizing each other, including, as I said, employees recognizing managers. I mean, that never happened before. How would you go about doing that other than running into a district manager or something like that?
Yeah. No, being seen is very powerful. And on that hierarchy of needs, it's literally the third thing up from the bottom. It's your physiological needs, then it's the feeling of safety, and then it's being seen. It's literally that important. I think that's why people love the restaurant industry so much when they work in it, is because of the immediate recognition you get from your guests when you do a good job. And like we thrive on that, but your team also thrives on it too.
And exactly. And you know, my background, as you mentioned, was I started as a server, but I was only a server for about 6 months. And then I got into management and I immediately went into the kitchen. So my background was very kitchen focused for about 10 years.
Okay.
So I come from that perspective of the front of the house gets rewarded on the spot by customers, right? Not only with a tip, but they have that one-on-one personal engagement. Well,
real-time rewarding.
Line cooks, chefs, they don't get that.
Right.
And sure, there's a server that comes in and says, hey, my customer loved their steak or whatever. Well, now there's a way to do it, a method to recognize that line cook right on the spot and give them a shout out on Motivosity.
What up, Unstoppables? I have a very special offer for you that could potentially change your life. So listen up. Restaurant Systems Pro wants to make 2025 your best year ever. And here's what they're going to do to help. When you sign up for Restaurant Systems Pro through February of 2025, they will do your books, your 2024 books for you at zero charge. Nothing to you, no cost to you to do your books. Plus, you're going to get all of the Restaurant Systems Pro profitability systems. So this is such a no-brainer deal. If you've heard of Restaurant Systems Pro in the past, listening to the podcast, and you've been interested, now is the time to sign up. Head to restaurantunstoppable.com/RSP or click the link below and make 2025 your best year ever.
So it's an app that's right on my phone.
Notes.
And as I said, this is you can scroll and see all the recognition that's happening. This is just from today. These are all the recognitions that are happening today.
That's so cool. Yeah, I'm definitely going to, first time mentioned on the show, and I had a feeling that was going to happen because I know that you're really into the world of tech and leveraging that technology. But take us back to, you said, this evolution. I kind of want to zoom up to 30,000 feet real quick. So like you mentioned, 1986, you were working as a busboy server. You went into management 10 years. So from like 87 to 97, you were in management. And then like, what was like the next, like AGM, GM, kind of like take us through that evolution.
So I went from
detail,
I went from being a server to, as I mentioned, going into the kitchen and became an assistant kitchen manager.
Okay.
And then from there, I became a head kitchen manager at the Bedford T-Bones, which is not far from here.
Okay.
And then from there, I moved into the general manager ownership position when we opened Cactus Jack's in Manchester. 1994.
So 1994, 8 years after being with the organization, you went to the GM and you had equity in the business.
Yes, and I remember it. I remember it well because I was at a place in my life. I had just had 2 children, and I wanted to keep growing and doing more. And I went and met with the founders of T-Bones and just said, you know, I got to do more. I don't want to just keep running this one restaurant. And that's when they found this location, said, okay, we're going to open a new concept. Would you like to come in as a founding partner? And I did, and I had to come to the table with real cash, not sweat equity.
Yeah, I want to get into this. And maybe, I don't, is this deal that you worked out with the previous owners the same deal you work out with your current employees?
Somewhat.
Okay. Well, I'm sure that the evolution is worth, if you're willing to talk about it, I'll get into that evolution. But go back to, who are these characters that were willing to give you equity in a business back in the early to mid 90s?
So there were 2 cousins and a third man named Mark Fensky. So it was we affectionately call them the 2 Peters and Mark. Okay. They started Salem T-Bones in 1984.
Okay.
and then Hudson was 86, and then I started actually in 87
Okay.
after graduating college with a chemistry degree, and I had a full scholarship to get my master's. I went to Villanova for 6 months and did some soul searching. In fact, my dad reminded me this morning when he called me for my birthday. It was right after his mother passed, and I came home for that in late November, and I said, I don't know if I can go back, Dad. Like I'm just not feeling it.
That's gonna be hard.
Getting a master's, full scholarship, give it up. And he said, well, what do you want to do? And I said, I don't know. I really don't. I said, I think I could picture myself owning a restaurant someday. And he reminded me of that this morning.
I'm sure he got a little scared when you said that.
And so then I just started working at T-Bones again, and I just fell in love with the business. I got bit by the bug, like a lot of people do.
Right.
And then opened Cactus Jack's in 94. From there, I just grew and did a lot of reading, went to a lot of conferences, and fell in love with the marketing side of the industry. And I became director of marketing.
What year was that?
That was 2000, right around late 90s.
Okay.
Late 90s.
Got it. So you went from operator of Cactus Jack's to chief marketing officer?
Yeah, director of marketing.
Got it. And that was in, like we'll call it 98, like 4 years after being made partner.
Yep.
And what was the continued evolution from there?
So then in 2000, again, I approached them and said, I'd like more. And they offered me a small ownership piece within the T-Bones companies. Again, at that time, there were 3 T-Bones and just 1 Cactus Jack's. So I came to the table with more equity, cash, but also they provided me with some sweat equity that if I stayed with the company for 5 years, they would bonus me a certain amount, which I could then take and reinvest back into the company, which is what I did.
Okay. So, I recently picked up this book that I've been hearing good things about. It's called Main Street Millionaire. Have you heard of it?
No.
Cody Sanchez is the author, and she basically makes this argument that there's this huge opportunity where boomers are retiring, and there's a whole wave of people that are going to be retiring that don't have any succession plan, or they just don't have a plan after retirement, and they have all these equities, they own the business, their kids don't want to take over. And if you go and you approach these people, these legacy brands, and you say, hey, like, I love the brand, I want to keep it going, like, let's work something out, no money down, but like you basically say, if you're doing 15% profit, you take 7.5, I take 7.5, but my 7.5 goes towards paying you the equity in the business, and then you just pay me as an employee until we, what are your thoughts on that?
So well, you're hitting the nail on the head for
Is that what the plan was?
basically where I am in my career right
Okay.
now. And so let me continue the fast forward of this. So in 2004, again, I approached the founders. They were roughly my age. They were in their 60s. One was in his early 70s. And they were very absentee at that point. And I was running the company with Mark, the other younger founder. And I went to them and said, I'm making most of the major decisions. I'm the one that's creating the vision for the future, and I think I should be the CEO. So I basically asked for the position.
Wow.
And they said, okay.
Sweet.
So I became CEO in 2004. In 2007, the 2 older Peters wanted to retire. And so Mark and I and an equity partner came in, and we bought them out, borrowed several $1 million, and it was a 2-day closing, 2007 New Year's Eve, 2008 New Year's Day. Fortunately, we had attorneys that didn't mind working on New Year's Eve and New Year's Day. And then what happened in 2008?
Oof.
And we just took on several $1 million of debt.
Wow.
We did fine. We didn't put a lot of money in our pockets, meaning Mark and I. We muddled through it, and I still recall this because my partner now, Bill, he was the equity guy that came in. He remembers that I said, you know what? We're going to be busy. We're going to spend a lot of money advertising to keep our restaurants busy, keep employees very busy, getting paid well, and the rest of the company's not going to make as much money. But that's the decision that I made, and it was the right one because we were busy while other restaurants were shutting doors and slowing down. We stayed relative
Right. Playing the long game.
Through 2008 and 2009. Yep.
Yeah. So you threw a lot of dates at me. 94 was when you had your first stake in the game. You became the director of marketing in 98. By 2000, you're talking about more equity. 2004, you're the CEO of the organization. 2007, you bought out the organization with Mark.
Yep.
That's where we're at.
That's
so,
it.
I guess where was the organization in 2007? How many units did you have?
So at that time, there were 5 T-bones and 2 Cactus Jacks.
7 locations. So not too much different than where you were in 2015 when I had you on the show.
Right.
You opened the Copper Door was the only difference.
Yeah.
What has the evolution from what have your personal challenges been during this evolution as a, restaurateur from buying equity to CEO?
Yeah.
Take us kind of through those
So
challenges.
opening this location, Copper Door, was a giant project and risk because it was a brand new concept. It was more upscale than T-bones. It's in a very high profile location on one of the busiest intersections in the entire state. I mean, we're on the only road that goes from Maine to Vermont.
Yeah.
It's the only east-west highway.
And it connects the seacoast to
Yes.
Keene State. Lots of
Right.
college kids and families going through this
So,
area.
as it was going up, there was a tremendous amount of pent-up demand. People are excited to see a new upscale concept. And we came out of the gate really strong. But
what year is it with here?
2011.
So we're at the Copper Door, the original location. Okay.
Yes. And we did not execute. We were just... lesson learned, I will never open a restaurant again in the month of December.
What's the lesson there?
Because December is a very festive month. People want to go out. They want to have fun, especially at an upscale place like this. And we were just smoked. I remember us bringing in other employees to prep overnight because that's how busy we were. Wow. We had to rent a refrigerated truck because we didn't have enough room in the walk-in. And it took us a good 6 months to climb back out from the damage we had done when we first opened because we didn't execute. We didn't execute. We had a tremendous amount of complaints online, everything. It was a bad 6 months.
Yeah. So the lesson here is open during the slow time and swing into.
Yeah.
I'm not really a huge fan of grand openings either. I think a lot of people want to come out of the gate strong, but if you open under the radar and just kind of let word of mouth take care of it.
That's how we have done it. But again, given the location and the high profile location and the pent up demand for an upscale place in Bedford, New Hampshire, that I think we tried to open quietly, but there was just no way to do it because of the location.
So, I want to kind of get into the evolution, but I am really interested in this idea of, purchasing and taking over businesses and how to structure that. And I didn't mean to ask you when we started. This is a new question I'm asking all my guests, what you're doing, your percent margin profit. I think that really kind of helping my listeners start out. I mean, I see the volume you're doing here. We're at Copper Door, the original location, big parking lot. It was Tuesday, 1 o'clock when I rolled up, 1:30 or around that time. This place was packed on a Tuesday for lunch. What percent profit are you doing at your Copper Doors?
So the Copper Doors are north of 10%.
North of 10%.
They do very well. Again, it's part of it is it's the price point, and they each did $8 million each last year, which is it's a head scratcher for people that aren't familiar with New Hampshire. They think it's just cow fields and.
I mean, we've come a long way.
But it's a very popular brand. We really found the sweet spot with it's upscale but not stuffy. It's not fine dining. We've got a white tablecloth here, but you can order a salad, a stone oven pizza, and get in and out for under $30. Yeah. Or you can spend $48 on a filet mignon. We've got that good balance on the menu. That really speaks to pretty much every demographic.
Yeah, and your reservations are booked out for weeks, if not longer.
Well, people always say that, we can never get in there. I'm like, well, come on a Monday at 4.
Yeah. Well, I know this personally because it's my girlfriend's one of her. I think it is her favorite restaurant. for sure. And I think part of that reason why is because she's gluten free, and you guys are really good at catering to gluten free. Your buns are amazing.
Yeah,
I've tried
good.
them. And I have another set of friends that like they make it down here at least once every other week. So you're doing something right.
Good.
And I can't wait to dive into it. What about the copper, or about the T-bones?
So T-Bones is our flagship. You know, it's been around, as I mentioned. We celebrated 40 years in business last November 25th. And we built a brand new, it's the first time we ever did a ground up build T-Bones. This was a ground up build, but T-Bones was the first one we ever did in Concord, New Hampshire, the one that we opened in the pandemic.
Recently, yeah.
Another incredible location right off 93. It's when I say right off 93, you can see it from the highway. It's like right on the highway, and that's a rare sight to be able to find a piece of property. We partnered with the person that owned the property. He knocked down a motel and developed a Hilton True, brand new hotel, and we own the other half of the property, and it's doing tremendous.
So percent profit, are you willing to share there?
Yeah, T-Bones is kind of a blend depending on the location. You know, some of them are in the high single digits. Concord's just north of 10.
Got it. So back to the evolution, I guess, getting into this. From your personal perspective, I like to say behind every great restaurant is a great person and great people, right? So what have your challenges been from 2007 when you took over as a you had a partner, Mark. He recently passed, didn't he?
He did, and I'd like to talk about that a little bit.
Yeah.
So the pandemic, when we bought out the two Peters, we obviously had the Great Recession, which
Right.
was a big challenge. But it was something that everybody was going through, right? Pandemic, similarly, we weren't the only ones going through it.
Right.
So, you know, but losing my partner, Mark, was really unexpected. He was very young. He was in his early 60s. He passed of cancer very quickly. And, you know, so that was, we were just coming out of the pandemic, and we were looking forward to what's our next project? How Mark and I were actually talking about, to your point about baby boomers, how are we going to transition him out at the time? Because, and we were already talking about bringing in other leaders to buy him out. And he passed. And it was fortunately, we had really good buy-sell agreements, which I also will highly suggest to your viewers to make sure that you've got really good buy-sell agreements, because you never know what's going to happen. And it was a lot. It was a lot to go through emotionally, and then of course legally and financially. Those are three things that consumed my entire 2024 year.
Wow.
Literally the whole year. It was overwhelming.
So I mean, I think this is the importance too of just having the conversations. Like, what are we going to do? So when you say good buy sell agreements, is that a part of the partnership agreement?
Yes.
To have that like
The operating agreements. Yeah.
So get more into the details of what a good buy sell agreement.
So it's interesting. We actually changed our buy sell agreements since Mark's passing. You basically, you have these in place so you don't have to make decisions when someone passes or someone sells or someone wants to sell, because otherwise you're making decisions in a moment where you might not be thinking clearly. So these were all thought out and went through with Mark and I 10 years ago, with our corporate attorney, and so that they were all in place. It was just a matter of following that roadmap. But where it got complicated for us was because it was a good chunk of money.
Yeah.
And I didn't want to have the company buy all his shares. I didn't want him to redeem all his shares, because it would have put a bit of a financial strain on the company. So I did a blend of the company redeemed some of it, and then people on the leadership team that we've talked about. Some of them took out loans. We're not talking like tens of thousands. We're talking hundreds of thousands in loans, and they use the actual shares as collateral, working again with primary bank. And so they came in, and some of them are young. Some of them, our controller's, she's 32. She's got 5 children. She's married. Our director of marketing and menu development, she's 40. She has 5 children. She's married. Our director of dining room operations, he's 40, I believe. So they all came in as 2 of them, our controller and our director of dining room operations. Neither of them were owners in our company.
I think this is the future. I really do.
So it gave them an opportunity. So now not only do they have obviously skin in the game, but they've got true ownership. It was the plan Mark and I were working and marching towards anyway. So it just happened a lot quicker than any of us anticipated. But it's been something that worked out, fortunately, for everybody.
Yeah, and I really do think that this is the future. And I think the first person I had on the show was down in Charleston, Uptown Social. The name of the greater restaurant group is escaping me, but they have Bodega as well. And they came from a group out of New York City, but their whole model is basically they get people, they identify employees that are just got it, that want it, that are hungry for it, and they give it an opportunity for, I think you have to be with a company for a minimum of like 5 or 7 years to have the option. And then you can buy as little as 1%, and they figure out what the EBITDA, the business is, the value of the business. And then you say, okay, it's valued at $1 million. If you want to be a partner, then you have to put down $10,000,
right?
And you have 1% of the business.
And that's essentially, we have that as well. We have, our general managers are called managing operators,
yeah.
and they share in the percentage of EBITDA every quarter. Once they've been a managing operator for at least one contractual period, which is 5 years, they then may be asked, it's not the option, it's not guaranteed, they may be asked to become an actual owner in the company at varying percents for varying restaurants. Moving forward now, looking forward, if someone wants to buy into the company and they're invited, they will have to buy a small percentage of the entire enterprise, so that, because everybody would want to buy into Copper Doors,
Right.
but that, they got to take the lower stores that aren't quite as profitable as good as with the good profitable stores. So it's something that that's the model we're gonna do going forward. But we do right now, we have probably 12 different employees, managing operators that own, as you said, 2% or 3% of different locations.
Where can you start, or when can you start this process, in your opinion, of adopting this business model of scaling and literally growing from the inside?
It's a hard one to answer because it just happened organically with us, a long time ago. But I think you gotta, I think you got to be at least, 10 years in business to just even start thinking about that.
Why that number?
Because 5 years, if you open a restaurant and you make it 5 years, you're really successful. It's hard to make it 5 years. 10 years, that means you're really solid. You've grown your company. You've got good long-term employees. Hopefully, a lot of them have been with you for 10 years. I just feel like that's the right number.
Yeah. I mean, I see people doing it before then too, and I think it's just so hard to attract onto yourself the talent, and I don't think you can do it alone anymore because it's such a competitive marketplace, and there's so many things you got to be good at.
I agree.
Like, you can't just cook food and serve it. You need, to your point, like a controller, a director of marketing, and you have all these new roles and all these new strengths that need to be there in order to be at to compete at the top.
Absolutely.
So
I have friends locally, even nationally, because I'm on the board of directors for the National Restaurant Association, and some of them are single unit operators, and I don't know how they do it.
Right.
And especially during the pandemic, I mean, man, it was a heavy lift for our team. We were doing nothing for 2 years, but figuring out how to pivot. It was overwhelming, and I used to think, God, how are these independents, the true independent, single person operator doing it? And quite frankly, I had a lot of them call me and ask, hey, how are you handling this? What are you doing to this? Just different things, because they didn't have that person to bounce off of, right? They don't have that, and that's part of the thing with losing my partner, Mark. He and I were partners for 30 years, and he was the guy that it was him and I that owned and controlled the company. So I would talk to him about things that big topics, like, hey, what do you think about this? And so that was a loss, but since that year's gone by, I rely very much on my partners on the leadership team. It's really good.
Yeah, I mean, divide and conquer, right? And how do you get somebody to treat it like they own it? Why would you expect them to treat it like they own it?
Unless they own it.
Right.
100%.
A lot of people don't agree. They say avoid partners at all costs, but if we learn and share about what good partnerships look like and how to set those up to protect all parties involved, and I think we just don't talk about this sort of stuff, which is one of the reasons why I really try to push to learn more about it. And we're taught you don't talk about money, you don't talk about relationships, and where do the restaurants go wrong the majority of the time? Financially, in relationships. We don't talk about it. I think there's so much to be learned in those two subjects right there in the industry. So thank you for being willing to open up.
Sure.
To get vulnerable.
I agree with you, by the way, on both those topics.
Right. So I am curious, one thing, unless there's any other lesson you want to drop on us about the specifics of setting up these relationships. You did mention that for you, it's a minimum of 5 years they get invited.
After their first 5-year managing operator.
Is there a, specifics about what you're looking for, the qualities of an individual to be extended that invitation?
It almost, no. Okay. Because it happens. The people that want to rise to the top will raise their hand. Right. And they will participate in things that are, I invited last year, I put it out to the top people that I felt in our company, not our leadership team, but the people that are running the stores. And I put it out to them and said, hey, I'm going down to the Public Affairs Conference in Washington, D.C. to engage with the National Restaurant Association and our elected federal officials. Write a 1-page reason why you want to go and what you hope to gain from it. And I could have predicted the people that were going to write those 1-pagers. And it was exactly those 5 people that did. And so that's really how it happens for us. I can see it already now too. I can think of 3 people right now that just keep raising their hand and want to do more, like I did, right? And maybe that's why I'm drawn to it, because that's what I did.
Yeah, I'm thinking of Nick Cirillo, who is the author of Slice of the Pie, and he owns Nick's Pizza in Chicago area. In that book, he talks about creating tangible lanes for growth, like tangible framing for growth within the organization, because it's not enough to be willing to let people grow with you, but they need to see a blazed highway of the path you take to grow. And when you have a destination, partner, and I want to be a partner. Okay, here's the path you take to get there. And if you put a spotlight on that path, the people who want it will take the path, but you have to show them the way. They can't just expect. So if you go through the work to make those paths clear, then you have literal pathways for growth within the organization, and the cream will rise to the top of that path.
Well, and that's exactly what's happened with our company, is that I call them the second generation, because the first generation blazed that path, and I was obviously the person that started it, if you will, blazing that path of I want to do more, I want to own more, I want to open, and so that first generation did that. Now there's this whole second generation, the people that are in their 30s and 40s. They see what that first generation was able to attain, and so they're motivated by that. And it's been really powerful to see young people wanting to stay with us and grow with us and be owners. Yeah. It's really powerful.
I love it, man. One thing I am curious about, you started 1984.
The company started in 1984.
84. Yeah. And you came 2 years later.
Yeah.
How many locations were they at in 86?
86, 2. Just Salem and Hudson.
So you've really seen the majority of the growth, right, from that point.
Yeah.
Now the brand is 40 years old, and a legacy brand. What are the challenges associated with keeping a legacy brand relative?
Remodels. We just did 3 last year. And part of it is I didn't spend a dime during the pandemic. We were just hoarding cash as much as we could, because it was so unprecedented, so unpredictable. So, you got Salem T-Bones was a 40-year-old store that we lease. And so it's also, sometimes it's difficult to invest back into a leased building that you don't own.
Yeah.
But we did that. We redid their entire bar and most of their dining room, expanded their bar, and it was very helpful because we've had massive competition open up down there too. Then we remodeled Derry T-Bones, which was opened in 2004. So you're talking, 20 years.
Yeah.
Needed a remodel, new parking lot. We closed, new tile floor, closing for 2 weeks to get all that done. And then we just did Bedford T-Bones, again, closed for 2 weeks to get all that done, and it came out fantastic. But those are the, Salem. I'll skip Hudson for a second, but Salem, Derry, and Bedford are the three of the four oldest T-Bones. The second oldest is Hudson T-Bones, which is a leased property. We're in the process of, we actually just have our planning board meeting in 2 weeks. We're actually going to move and do a ground-up build of Hudson T-Bones.
Okay.
Right next door to Walmart and across from Sam's Club.
Got it.
Which is a great location, another high-profile location. And so rather than remodel that particular location, we decided, you know what, we're gonna take the plunge and go back into debt and open up a brand new, much larger Hudson T-Bones.
So of the 9 total locations that you own between Cactus Jack's, Copper Door, and T-Bones, how many of those do you own the actual buildings?
We own all but 3, the 3 oldest ones.
Okay. And
Salem,
these new
Hudson,
deals,
Bedford.
Are those going to be...
Hudson we will own it, yeah. So we'll only have 2 leased properties, and they both have very long-term
leases. Is that a
leases.
lesson learned?
It's something that I inherited by buying out the 3 founders.
Right.
The 3 founders, they had a different philosophy. They either they didn't have the cash or they didn't want to take the risk of buying a piece of property and building from the ground up. The chains only did that back in the 80s, right? The independents, they were either going into existing defunct. I mean, that's what happened with Salem T-Bones, Hudson T-Bones, Bedford T-Bones. They were failed restaurants that they renovated and built the T-Bones brand.
Right. But I mean, plus the security of owning the property, right? And the additional, so now you're not just a restaurateur, but you're an entrepreneur.
Yes.
Thinking that bigger picture of
Right.
beyond the brand, beyond the concept.
And even, like here, we had to replace the sidewalks last year. It was like $30,000, but it didn't bother me because it's our property.
Yes.
We own the property.
You're investing in your own assets.
And one of the other things that I will say, including, the properties that we do own, we're the landlord and we're the tenant, and they're 2 separate entities. It's not tied into one company. So there's an operating company, which is the restaurant, and then there's the real estate company, which is the landlord. But you still have, there's still pressure to make sure that the real estate entity does well because they've got a loan. You're not buying the property with cash. So, but they all have triple net leases, which is something that I learned from my former partners, and I love it because triple net means I'm responsible for making sure this property stays in tip-top shape. I don't want to have to rely on the landlord. And that's one of the reasons why we're leaving Hudson T-Bones, because the landlord didn't take care of the property the way that we needed it to be taken care of. Yeah. So it motivated us to say, we're moving.
Can you get into the details of a triple net lease? What that looks
Sure.
like?
So our triple net leases are basically, we have to take care of everything all the way to the property boundaries. Everything. The parking lot, the roof, HVAC, taxes, property taxes, that's all on us. Now, people say, well, that must cost you a fortune. True, but our lease terms are lower, meaning our rent is lower because we're taking care of the landlord's property.
Got it.
But it's the way that I want it. I don't want to rely on the landlord to make sure he's plowing on time. I don't want to rely on the landlord to make sure our roof's not leaking. It's just some landscaping, all that. It's more work for us, but it's just something that works for us, that we can take care of our own restaurants and properties like I take care of my own home.
Right. So any other elements of a triple net lease that are worth mentioning?
That's pretty much it.
Okay. So in terms of like percent difference, say like, if you're paying less for the lease or the rent because you're taking care of all these other additional liabilities, like how much, like what percentage less should you be asking for it? It's like $5,000 a month, right?
That's a hard thing to answer.
Ballpark percentage. Like what is
it's too difficult to answer because it really relies on the location. Like our Salem T-Bones is a great location, not as good as Bedford T-Bone's location. So it's hard to put that in there. But I will tell you, one of the things that we've built into our restaurants that we own the property is we have overrides.
Okay.
And the overrides, again, really levels the playing field. So if we do picking a number, $4.5 million, any dollar over $4.5 million in revenue, the landlord gets 5% of the revenue. And then we do that to protect the restaurant during down times. So if we have a downturn in the economy, our sales drop, so we don't have to pay the override. But when times are good, we're making more money because we're doing really good revenue, and then the landlord shares in that success as well. And it's a model that's worked really well for us, particularly with the restaurants that we own the property.
When negotiating triple net leases, are there any things to take into consideration in terms of like, because I mean, if you're doing this to protect yourself, right, from, you don't want to be dependent on the landlord and all this stuff, and you're doing them a favor by taking on the responsibility and the liability. Like, what is the value of that, and like what things to consider, I guess, that might not be obvious when negotiating that rate?
Well, first of all, make sure you have a really good attorney to look it over. Which just a side note here, we just hired our first in-house general counsel, which I'm thrilled about.
Nice.
To have someone looking over everything legal. But I'll just give you one example, and the reason why we're leaving Hudson. There's a culvert that runs under the parking lot. It actually runs under our building as well. It's a 6-foot round culvert that has a brook running through it. It's been there since the 50s. Thank God it's in our lease that we're not responsible for the culvert. But if that it would have never crossed my mind to make sure that you're on a triple net lease. Maybe you're in charge of taking care of everything under the ground too.
Right.
That would have crossed my mind. It does now. But he had to repair that culvert, and we've had issues with it because he didn't repair it properly.
Yeah, there's just so many unforeseen possible things that are possible. That having a lawyer there to really look at all the possibilities and to consider all those things.
It's hard because when I say make sure you have a good lawyer. There's a term in hiring attorneys. It's called, you don't necessarily, if you're in business, you want the best attorney to protect you, right? You want them to be just always looking out for you. That said, they can blow deals too, because they're looking at it from the perspective of, I got to make sure that he's protected, the company's protected, and oh, by the way, the attorney needs to be protected.
Right.
Okay.
So are you thinking win?
So they have,
win or
so
win?
Right. So sometimes they are talking about, depending on the subject, but they're coming at it with what's referred to as a belts and suspenders position. You don't need a belt and suspenders. You need one or the other. And so there are some attorneys that are belts and suspenders, and they can kill deals because they're too strict on protecting you, and whoever's on the other side is going, no, that doesn't work.
Yeah.
So it's a fine balance.
What up, Unstoppables? I have a very special offer for you that could potentially change your life. So listen up. Restaurant Systems Pro wants to make 2025 your best year ever. And here's what they're going to do to help. When you sign up for Restaurant Systems Pro through February of 2025, they will do your books, your 2024 books for you at zero charge. Nothing to you, no cost to you to do your books. Plus, you're going to get all of the Restaurant Systems Pro profitability systems. So this is such a no-brainer deal. If you've heard of Restaurant Systems Pro in the past, listening to the podcast, and you've been interested, now is the time to sign up. Head to restaurantunstoppable.com/RSP or click the link below and make 2025 your best year ever. We got down this where we are talking right now about this. I was really looking at like, how do you evolve legacy brands? What are the challenges, right? And you said, staying fresh. So when you are trying to stay fresh, are you budgeting cash?
Yeah.
To make sure you have money there? What's a reasonable percentage?
So, we generally, again, it depends on the age of the store, but we generally budget between 50 and 100,000 a year for CapEx, capital improvements. Major renovations, fortunately, like I said, we hoarded a lot of cash during the pandemic. Major renovations can cost anywhere from $500,000 to $1 million. You know, most restaurants don't have that type of cash sitting in their bank accounts.
Right.
They just don't. So you either have to borrow money, which is a bummer if you've been open for 25 years and you have no debt and you're going to go back out and take more debt. But it's a necessity because as you call it, a legacy brand, you will become irrelevant so quickly if you don't stay on top of it.
So like every 5 to 10 years, are you guys doing that?
We're about every 10 years.
Every 10 years.
But you know, that doesn't mean like we replace carpets and we paint and we keep it fresh and clean. But we're talking major renovations like moving walls or building outdoor dining like we've done in 2 of our locations, things like that. Those are major renovations
Things really
that are every 10
up.
years. Yeah.
What are the? I mean, you've been doing this for 30 years now. When considering a major renovation, what is the best bang for its buck to really create that juxtaposition where people are like, oh, what the hell's going on over here? Like, how do you spend that money wisely?
It's really the whole package. The first thing, it has to be a wow. Like, and I'll share an example. The first renovation we did at CJ's in Manchester, we spent a lot of money. You know, we put a new beer walk-in in, we did new decor, but it wasn't the wow that the customers were like, well, what'd you do? Like,
it was like an operational wow, but it wasn't like
it was more back of the house. It was more, they just didn't see what we did. Bedford T-Bones, in contrast, was a giant wow. I mean, you walk in there, we made the bar twice as big. We relocated the host stand. All new flooring, all new decor, new ceiling. Like it was a giant wow. It cost us $750,000, but it was worth every penny because our sales jumped 25%, and they haven't gone back down since.
Wow, that's awesome. What about menu? Has T-Bones evolved?
Menu's super important for us. And our director of marketing and menu development, she's a educated chef, and she has her marketing degree too. She's got a lot going on.
Kate? I think you mentioned
Nicole Barrera.
Yeah.
So she not only keeps the menu interesting and reinvigorates. We do it twice a year. And sometimes they're big changes. Sometimes they're just, little adjustments. The second one's usually just a little adjustment. But I remember back in the 80s when we had a whole section of pasta. I mean, we probably had like 12 pasta dishes. Well,
times are changing.
Times have changed, right? And we still have, I think, 1 or 2, but it's not what people want. We now have bowls on the menu. Bowls are all the rage. So and that's one of the reasons why I love this concept, Copper Door and T-Bones, is that we're able to flex with different times of menu engineering. It's just the way human nature is. They're not going to stay.
You're not married to anything on the menu.
No, we can flex all we want because it's T-Bone's great American eatery. And so we've got obviously Italian on there, and we've got Asian, and we've got vegetarian. So it gives us the ability to flex when food trends change, and they always do.
Yeah, and one thing that you've been really good at is capitalizing on the gluten. I mean, you have a whole menu dedicated to gluten.
We actually eliminated that, and I'm sorry to tell you. Yes, and I'll share why.
Yeah, please.
So we actually went to a gluten intolerant friendly menu.
Okay.
So, and studies have shown celiac is a disease. We all know that. I'm not sure if your girlfriend has celiac disease.
No, she is by choice. Gluten
by
avoidant.
choice.
Yeah, and she makes it a point to say like it's not a
good for her.
An allergy.
Good for her because a lot of people don't.
I know it's a pain in the ass.
And it's very disruptive to the kitchen.
Huge.
Very disruptive. And this is one of those 3-legged stool decisions.
I made sure to tell her too, for the record. I was like,
good,
just so you know, like make sure they know that it's not an allergy.
This is a perfect example of the 3-legged stool decision, right? A really small percentage of people have celiac disease, and I feel bad for them. I do.
Yeah, it's horrible.
But I can't cater an entire meal around one person in the restaurant that has celiac disease to make sure that it's gluten-free. We can't do it here. We make pizza dough. We have it's airborne.
Yeah.
Right? And so we made the decision based on it's the best for the business, keeps us protected from making a mistake. As we talked about, mistakes happen. It's best for the employee because
it's a lot of liability.
A lot of liability for the employee to get it right, for the the chefs to make it right, and then it's for 98% of the customers, it works for them.
Yeah.
So it wasn't an easy decision, but when we look at it from that perspective, it made a lot of sense.
So what was your previous model?
It was gluten free.
And now we're
gluten intolerant friendly. So your girlfriend is a perfect example. She's choosing not to do it. So our bun is gluten free. We purchase it gluten free. We're relying on that manufacturer to make good on his or her claim that it's truly gluten free. But for the people that choose to eat gluten free because it's a choice, we have many gluten intolerant friendly menu items that you can do. And it also puts it's just a giant burden on the kitchen to know a different spec, a different spec from what you normally make for a salmon.
Yeah, and when you're jamming on a Friday and then you have one person or you ask for that gluten-free and then you got to stop everything you're doing, you got to sterilize everything, you got to pull out, you got to dedicate space in a very valuable real estate in the kitchen to a gluten-free. It's all these things that
the fryolators alone, right? We have 3 fryolators. One restaurant has 4, but we can't just dedicate one fryolator to be gluten-free.
I think you're justified in your decision. So, I just wanted to point out that you are clearly paying attention to trends, and you've been. I think that's the marketing background. You said you're super passionate about marketing. That's one place I wanted to pivot to. When I spoke to you in 2015, you were getting an app. You were getting rid of your old loyalty program. You were adopting an app to replace the loyalty program, where you were really excited because you're going to be able to segment your customer base into marketing segments, so you communicate more directly. I think the other thing, I don't know if you had gotten away from NCR, but you were bringing on tablets. So
it's so interesting.
So all these things were happening.
It's so interesting you bring it back. So one of the big lessons I've learned in tech is when they say, and this is a really important lesson, when a tech company says we are fully integrated, make sure you check that. That's in my experience, it has never been the case.
Yeah,
never.
Yeah, I think the tech companies are getting better about opening up their APIs. So what happened with that app?
So the app never happened.
Okay.
Because they allegedly fully integrated with NCR. They didn't. As things moved so quickly, we started recognizing that an app is only good as how it gets built, and then it has to be updated so much. We spent more time investing in our websites, which are very robust. And then, speaking of NCR, we gave them the boot in the summer of 23. Is that right?
Was it a year or 2 years after the pandemic?
In the summer of 23.
Okay.
And so, and it's called Catalyst. They're on the North Shore.
Okay.
And there's a bunch of reasons why we chose them. I wasn't the decision maker on that. That was the team, the leadership team that were working deep on that. Lisa in particular, she's our chief administrative officer.
Okay.
And we liked the fact that they were local. Their service were all local, meaning we hardly need any on-site service, but service calls, it's people that live here in the Northeast.
That's cool.
Primarily. All of their hardware is any kind of tablet you want. It can be a Droid, or it can be a
iOS or whatever.
Any of those, yeah. So it's our choice. And we actually moved to a leasing model. So after 3 years, we get all new equipment. And I made sure it was manufactured in North America.
Nice. Why does that matter?
Because I don't know what's going to happen with China.
Yeah. I think it's also too, I think this country is so focused on the bottom line and just paying the least amount for shit. We don't ask what does this mean long term?
Yeah.
I believe in it's weird. We live in a very small world. We can be on the other side of the planet in less than 24 hours.
Yes.
We can be as far away as physically, humanly possible in 24 hours, further than where we can do in an hour today, 100 years ago. The world has shrunk, and we got to ask ourselves, what are our values as Americans? Do we believe in democracy? If so, do we want to be supporting communist countries? is that good for us when we're shoveling money to our neighbor who has very different opinions than we do? I'm not trying to say we need to like hate other people and opinions. I think it's important to stay open-minded, but at the same time, we're really got to think about where's our money going and how important is it to save $100 on a device when we're spending $1,000. Like
it's very well said, and that aligns with our philosophy that we want to buy as much local as we can. And I know that's so,
but local today
overused.
Is like this country.
Yes, right. And I joke about it, but the CEO of Catalyst, and I told him after we signed the deal, I said, just so you know, I know where you guys are. Yeah. So if we have an issue, I'll get my car and drive 2 hours down there to speak directly with your team. Like that's, and I was joking about that, but that's important that I know who these people are. I know how to make sure that our teams have access to the people that can help them.
Yeah. I mean, there's a book I recently read called Power and Progress. Daron Akmoglu. I hope I'm saying your name correctly. He's a professor at MIT, I want to say, or maybe it's Harvard. And the whole premise of that book is this idea of like whoever has the most money has the power, controls the narrative. And I think it's really important in sharing this kind of information of like there are more companies out there than Toast, Spot On, and Square. And they have the marketing budget. So they're the ones that are going to be out there aggressively marketing, getting this information in front of you. But it's really important. I think as technology increases, there are a lot of great companies that can compete with these companies that are local. You're keeping your money local.
Well, you're absolutely right. And that's why we were excited to bring on Catalyst, because point of sales are my God, they're so critical. Point of sale goes down for a shift. It's difficult. Right.
It does matter. You don't want to buy a POS, right?
Right.
That is a real thing.
Right.
But at the same time, it's like we got to be really conscious about like letting some of these companies get too powerful.
So one of the reasons we chose them, well, there's 2 reasons, 3. Local, we already talked about. These guys that developed this point of sale, they actually are restaurateurs.
Oh, cool.
So they get it, right? They get it. And 3, because we're one of their largest clients, again, big fish, small pond, right? I like that because they've been incredible at customizing our needs for things like loyalty, for things. And we're still working on things that still trying to get, certain things programmed. But 99% of what we wanted has been done. And it was difficult. The first 3 or 4 months was hard because it's not just an ordering platform. We had to move all our millions of dollars of gift cards over. We had to move our 100,000 loyalty members over. Yeah. We had to have it line up perfectly with our accounting, and we adopted Restaurant 365, which is another.
About that. Yeah.
And that's
when did that happen?
2 years ago.
How's it going?
Mostly good. Again, it's been a slow creep to get it to where we want it. I'm not that close to it, so I don't want to comment too much. That's really our controller and Lisa, our chief administrative officer. But it's much better than it was. The first 6 months were rough.
What was rough about it?
Just not having.
I encourage you to speak transparently.
We fully integrate.
Right.
Well, no, you didn't really.
Right. So, I mean, what is your tech stack today? So you have Catalyst, POS.
Yep.
You have Restaurant 365,
Yep.
which is your enterprise solution. I'm assuming that's general ledger, purchasing, budgeting, costing,
invoices, matching up invoices from the stores.
Yep. AR, AP. It is, what is the other? Training?
Training,
checklists?
We're still doing in-house.
Okay.
We've got a training team. It's all digital, but we're actually meeting with Opus to talk about their training.
I've heard a lot of great things about Opus.
Yeah, my brother's the one that actually introduced me to them. My brother's in a venture capitalist group, and they invested in Opus, and so I'm excited.
What did he say about Opus that has your interest?
Well, again, it's very specific towards the restaurant industry, and the part that I love about it is it's mobile, and it's very front facing for the for the frontline employees. Like it's right there.
Yeah.
It's not sitting down. It's not at a computer. It's not. So we'll see. I've got a demo coming up in 2 weeks.
Okay. Let me know how that goes.
I will.
I'm interested for sure.
We use hot schedules, for scheduling purposes, which is fine. It works great.
365 doesn't have a scheduling.
They do, and that's some of the. We actually, it's funny. Lisa and I have a whole Word document of all the different tech that we have, and it's mind blowing to me compared to what we had 20 years ago. And
it's crazy.
There's probably it's
even 10 years ago.
Yeah.
And I was really excited to get into tech because when I spoke to you 10 years ago, like I remember from listening to the episode and from having the conversation that you were very like excited about the technology and the world of marketing.
Well, and it's the restaurant industry is. They're notorious for not spending money on tech because it's
always behind the curve.
Yeah, it's
Heads
again
down.
The low margins. You gotta spend where you see the biggest return, right? And sometimes tech can be helpful and efficient and lower costs or create more revenue,
right.
Whatever. But it's also hard to say, you know what, I'm going to spend this money here when I really need to put new carpets in.
Right. No, it's tough. I think plus there's like unprecedented, right? That word that gets thrown around so often these days where we're moving into a future where are we really going to have to learn how to do more with less? And are we going to really need to have system dependent operations, not people dependent operations? And what do those heavily, I think the world of technology and systems, like more independents can get their hands on that same level of technology that was only available to the larger corporations as technology improves. Moore's law, like exponentially technology is getting better. So I think that we're going to find this balance. It's inevitable where more and more independents are going to have to lean on tech to lower their labor costs.
I agree. And as I'm sitting here thinking, we have our own marketing team.
Yeah.
We have an agency that we used for a long time. She's still on board as a consultant, but we have our own web guy. He does all the programming for the website. We have another guy that does all the programming for point of sale. We've got 2 graphic designers, and then we have a director of marketing. All in-house.
Wow.
And does it cost us more? I'm sure it does. Than going out and hiring just an agency to do all of that.
Right.
But even though I'm sure it does cost us a bit more, I like the fact that I've got 5 people all thinking about our brand only. They're not with a marketing agency that's got 20 brands that they're managing, right? So I've got 5 people that's all they are focused on is how do we make our brands better.
Right. Yeah. And it's weird. Like, even me thinking about the companies that have been referred to us, like on different spectrums, right? You have owner.com, which is like basically they're geared towards like that digital presence, that online straight from Google search to ordering online they've modeled the best, the Domino's of the world to figure that out. But if you invest in that asset, like you're going to use their system and there's no wiggle room. Like we have optimized this system to get people from Google search to purchasing from you to getting into your app. And like, it's rigid and you're going to use our tested, tried way to do this. But then on the other side of that, there's Dash Track. And they're more for the fine dining, like custom experience. They want custom everything from your in-house experience to the digital experience. So like there are different, I think that level of diversity in the marketplace is really important. And I don't know why I'm sharing this, but to your point, like I think it is important to have, if you're a high touch, like the corporate door, you don't want to necessarily have that rigid one size fits all
Correct.
solution. That doesn't make sense for you. So having those developers does make sense.
Yep.
For sure. We were talking about the world of apps, and I think in 2015, like apps were all the rage. Like everyone needs an app. Like the future is apps. And then as the websites started to improve, people were like, "We can do the same thing with a really robust website."
That's exactly what happened.
That you can do with an app.
Right.
But now there's narrative that maybe there is an argument for apps because of habits associated with apps.
Yes.
Like, what are your thoughts on that?
We kind of dabble back and forth with that. I think we're still going to hold off a little bit going back into the app arena, mostly because, again, like I mentioned, our websites they're so robust and you might as well have an app. Like you can get anything you want off
Right.
of our website. You can look up your loyalty rewards. You can look up a gift card, see how much is left on it. You know, it's all right there on our website. So
Right.
I'm not sure that I want to invest in an app. It's hard to get people to download apps. I mean, look at how many apps I have.
I know.
I mean, you know, I've got folders with that. You know, it's hard. It's hard to get people to download an app unless you're incredibly loyal to that brand. And I don't think we need it right now.
Well, it's weird. The only people that I know who have said that you must have an app are also the people who own the company that developed the app. So until I get an unbiased opinion, it's like it's
look,
hard to say.
You know, the chains have it because you know, McDonald's and Starbucks and all that. It's I use the Starbucks app. I love it. It's simple. It's easy.
It's something
But
when you can just
they've got thousands
save it,
and thousands of stores.
Right.
And it makes sense for them because you can order ahead and get all that done. Speaking of that was a couple of good things that came out of the pandemic. One was online ordering. NCR was not very forward thinking with that, and we never had it. But that forced us to really ramp it up, and we did. So that was kind of a unexpected outcome of the pandemic. And the other one, you'll get a kick out of this too. This is just how we are as a company. We're so independent thinking and don't just do it because everybody's doing it. Curbside pickup, right? Almost every chain does it. We did it during the pandemic, and we measured it. And it's one thing that one of my other mantras. You can't manage what you won't or can't measure, right? So we measured it, and I looked at curbside takeout sales. It was like less than 2%. And it was a massive, heavy operational lift to schedule an extra person, to make sure you text. And it was massive. I'm like, it's less than 2%. I'm willing to give that up to be more efficient with our takeout and have, I get it. We're going to lose some of the moms that don't want to get out of their car because they got kids in the car.
or it's too cold.
I get
or
it.
Whatever.
Yeah. Or it's an elderly person, but chances are they're not.
Right.
So I get it. We're going to lose some of that. But again, it's a three-legged stool decision. I'm going to appease the 98% of our customers and do a better job for them and lose that 2%.
Yeah. No, what they say, what gets measured gets minded, you know?
There you go.
So that's a good one. I mean, there's so many things we could talk about. I am curious about the future and where you're headed. And I mean, as the CEO, it's your job to look into the future, to prepare for the future. I want to get your take on that, like holistically, big picture thinking. But anything we haven't discussed up to this point in terms of your evolution, your personal growth, things that you think my listeners should know in terms of what you've learned to get to this point in your career.
I'll give you one that a good friend of mine, he wished me happy birthday today, actually, Paul Harkin. He introduced me to the New Hampshire Lodging and Restaurant Association, and I had no idea what it was. And he was the CEO at the time, and I got interested. I joined the board, and it opened up this whole world to me of advocacy and how much elected leaders play into your business. It was, I had no idea that it was that impactful. I became chair of the New Hampshire Lodging and Restaurant Association. As I mentioned, I've been on the National Restaurant Association for 20 years. And I know all of our federally elected officials. I know them personally. I could literally text them. I never would have had that access without being involved in advocacy and really understanding the impact of local, state, and federal legislation. I've written many op-eds, and I've taken a few arrows for it, protecting our business. And I've had, including, on social media, like you're a business owner, you shouldn't be speaking out about this legislative issue. And I maintain, I never talk about social issues. I only talk about business-related issues. And I maintain it's just the opposite. As a small business owner, I don't care if you're not in the restaurant industry, as a small business owner, every regulation, local, state, and federal, affects your employees, your customer, and your business. Like 90%. Why shouldn't I be engaged?
Right.
Why shouldn't I have an opinion?
Right. I mean, you're making a point right now. I think we lost sight of what the restaurant industry was. If you look at the history of restaurants, going back to when we were settling this this country, you needed a public house in a town before you could officially register your town as a town. The first thing you needed was a public house. That's where the mail was. That's where people congregated for like religion or like whatever. It was the first thing you needed before anything else. You need a public house. In this industry, at least on this side of the ocean, really all started from the public house, the pubs. And from there, if you look at the evolution, like there was always in the center of every town, there was always a church and a restaurant. And like that's where people congregate and that's where people came together. It was the original internet. It's where you got your entertainment.
That's
it's where
fascinating.
You got your media.
I didn't know that.
And
fascinating.
The restaurant owners were they were mayors. They were people.
Yeah.
They had power. They had influence. And then over time, the restaurant industry became more transactional, more, less about being a place for your community to come together. Revolutions literally happened in bars. If you look at the Boston Tea Party, that's where people came together. They communicated, they schemed. I think we've kind of gotten away from that. And when I say that I think the restaurant industry has the power to change the world, I think what you're talking about right now, going to bat for, lobbying for like policy change and all this stuff, or at least creating awareness within your community about what this policy change means. We need to get back to that. I think we could do better about communicating this stuff.
You're 100% right.
Yeah.
And, I'm actually a friend and still keep in contact with Caroline Levitt, the White House press secretary.
Okay.
She's from New Hampshire.
Oh, cool.
And I supported her when she ran for Congress. And I reached out to her and asked her, so the Public Affairs Conference is coming up again in April down in D.C. And I asked her, I said, there's going to be 500 restaurateurs from all around the country that fly in to meet with their elected officials. I'd love to have President Trump come and address these restaurateurs, because you think about the top 3 issues right now: immigration, no tax on tips, and what was the third one? Immigration, no tax on tips, and tariffs.
I was going to say tariffs, yeah.
Right. Those are giant issues that affect our industry, and it would be great to hear, directly from President Trump about his thoughts on that. Because when people start asking me right now about no tax on tips. Well, what do you think about that? And I start explaining to them, because they just don't know the industry, right? I said, there's already a massive pay discrepancy between the front of the house tipped employees and the back of the house. You're gonna create an even more massive discrepancy between the two. We're going to struggle to get frontline tipped employees to want to become a manager, because we have employees that make between $60,000 and $80,000 a year as a tipped employee.
And now they're not going to be taxed on that money. And no two businesses are exactly the same. So you're forcing the restaurant industry into a square. But I tend to be very middle of the road politically. I see both sides. I understand that, and I understand that. I tend to lean more in the direction, I would say, conservatively, because I see what an over-regulated world can do as the world is changing so fast.
Well, and therein lies the unintended consequences that happen from regulations and laws. And here's another example. Don't you think landscapers and gardeners would say, you know what, I'm going to just pay my guys this much, and you as the property owner, you can tip those employees, and then they won't get taxed on it. There will be other industries that come out and go, oh, you know what, we should go to a tip model. That way they won't have to pay taxes on
right.
it. This is what happens when you start creating these very pigeonholed or boxing in industries with laws.
And one thing I've learned is that there are no two restaurants that exist. One of the beauties of the restaurant industry is that it's such a malleable industry. There's no right way to get from point A to point B. It's like the spectrum of possibilities.
I mean, think about the fast food guys, right?
Yeah.
Or the quick casual. Why would you, if you are a 20-year-old young lady or man and you're working at Panera, you're like, maybe I'll go wait tables. That way I won't have to pay taxes on my tips.
Right.
So they're going to struggle to find employees.
Right.
It's all these unintended consequences that happen when laws are created that disrupt a certain industry.
Yeah. So what is the solution relative to the tipping challenge? Like, what should we be doing? What should we be lobbying for in your opinion?
So I've testified many times, including down in Washington, D.C. this past fall. Tipped employees in general. Now, I know people like to carve out and go, well, no, what about the breakfast employee up in Colebrook, New Hampshire? I get it. I know. You can always find that little carve out to show the other side. But in general, the majority of tipped employees do extremely well, and they get a raise every single year. Do you know why? Menu prices go up every year.
Right. Inflation.
And you think about the last 5 years. I can tell you the exact number. In 5 years since the pandemic, we've raised our prices 25%.
Wow.
Giant. Never in my career has it gone up that much. So tipped employees are making 25% more than they did in 2020.
How much more is the back of house making?
Not 25% more.
Yeah. I mean, is the solution, where do you, I mean, a lot of people, and this, you saw it a lot.
And again, sorry, I don't want to come across as negative to tipped employees, because that's not what I'm trying to, that's not what I'm trying to get at.
Well, is the argument around tipping or taxing on tipped income, is it a mute argument because there's a bigger problem? Like, is the tip culture an issue? Like,
I think the tip culture has become an issue because people that work in non-tipped positions behind a counter, taking an order, flipping the tablet around, and having you sign it and tip
for 20%.
What did you do?
Right.
That's where the consumers are getting frustrated. They're getting frustrated when they got to get out of their car, go in, get their takeout, and then there's a tip jar to tip because all they did was hand you a bag.
Right.
That's the consumer side frustration. I don't hear any frustration from consumers about tipping a server who's waiting on them, who's creating an experience, who's making your dining experience more enjoyable because they're an ad. It's not they're enhancing the experience.
Where do you fall in the argument that we should just get away with tipping? Why is that not a practical outcome?
I'll tell you exactly why. We had 2 restaurants do it in New Hampshire. They both failed.
Why did they fail?
Because who wants to make $15 an hour on a Saturday night?
Right. But
they're all going to want to work Monday lunch.
Right. I think it's a very complex issue. The world I would personally love to see is a world where we recognize that, like, hey, like, if you want to treat this industry like a real industry, if we want to give the same benefits to our employees, health insurance, 401k, time off, we should have nothing but salaried employees, right? If we want to attract people, offer them the same benefits.
Can't.
Well, I mean, you can't, right?
Legislatively, you can't because they're not in a supervisory role.
Yeah, perfect example of over-regulating an industry and putting it in pigeonholing it, right? Like, to the point where they can't do the right thing. Like, it's getting harder and harder for restaurant owners and operators to do the right thing, whether that be taking care of their employee or purchasing local. It's like if you try to do the right thing to support your community and your staff, then you're going to go out of business because it's just not, like, you have to do I don't want to call it, is it the wrong thing, but you have to outsource. You have to, send your money further away from home, right? And it's very complex.
Yeah, and
right?
I think every industry would argue that they have a complex industry, right? They would. And those are the hard decisions that restaurant owners have to make. They have to make that hard decision of, I can get this product less expensive if I order it from the Midwest as opposed to the guy that's got a place up in Concord, New Hampshire.
Right.
I get it. It's hard. Those are hard decisions that you have to make and find what's most important to you, your brand, the 3-legged stool. What's most important to the company, to the employee, and to the guest, and that should drive your decision about where to buy whatever product it is that you're sourcing. Just to get back to where are things going?
Wait, real quick, one. I want to, hypothetically speaking, if there was if legislation came out that eliminated tipping for all restaurants, and all restaurants were forced to go to paying, not say minimum wage, but like paying, if we just eliminated 20% and added 20% to the, like, as a service charge, or just increase the per item value.
20%.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
What would happen?
The restaurant industry would go like this.
For how long?
a very long time, probably forever.
Why?
Because people would go to the grocery store.
And then what Tom did is he plummeted it down in a downward direction. But they're already spending that money, aren't they? Aren't they already spending it? Would it
You
make
can.
a difference?
I've heard it many times. I can make a chicken parmesan for $1.50 at home, and you're charging $22. Okay, now get rid of the tipping, and I'm going to be at $32.
Yeah.
Consumers will do the math. They'll do the math, and then be like, I'm not going to go out and spend that kind of money to go out to eat when I can make it at home for a fraction of the cost.
Right. I think what would happen is you're right. There'd be an initial plunge of people not going out to eat, and then I think that they'll realize eventually that it's a privilege. Not everyone not everyone's entitled to be able to go out and spend every one of their meals out. And I think today people kind of think of it's like it's my entitlement to be able to go out and eat.
Well, because it's ingrained in the country's culture,
right? But I think it would come back eventually. I think it would bounce back because it's a service it's a convenience that you're paying for.
I'm not willing to take that risk.
Yeah, and as somebody who owns restaurants, I don't blame you because there's a huge risk. Like, will you be able to survive until things recover?
Yeah,
like that's a hard thing to
it would be. You'd have to pay the tipped employees. I mean, I know what they make. They make between 18 and, on the low end, 18 if they're like super part-time and don't work a lot of weekend nights. 18 and as high as $40 an hour.
Yeah.
You'd have to pay them $30 an hour, which would raise prices probably 30%. It's not a sustainable model.
Yeah.
And so then now you're going to pay a server $30 an hour, and the line cook's going to go, well, wait a second, I'm only making 22. So now you're going to have to pay him $30 an hour, and then the manager's going to go, well, wait a second. And that's what that's the whole argument with minimum wage.
What about business models that eliminate the tipping role, like the server role, where it's like the buzzer experience, right? Or like a table talker experience, like you order. We bring the food to you. There's somebody floating, but we're limiting more than 50% of the people that.
So a lot of restaurants. I shouldn't say a lot, but there are restaurants that are doing that, especially the chains.
Yeah.
They're finding ways to cut labor via automation, or the model that you just described.
Right. Yeah. I don't have the answers. Are you?
I don't either.
I mean, so you were trying to pivot away from this, and I brought you back to it. Do you remember your train of thought?
Yes. So just the future and what am I looking down the road at? I do see that we are going to need, and it's hard for independents to do this, but we're going to need to find a way to automate some part of our business. I'm not sure what it is yet. Robots are not on my radar. I mean,
right.
There are places that do it. One of my partners was in Florida and had a robot running around serving food, and I think that's a ways off. I'm not sure people are ready for that right now. I think it's coming someday.
Yeah,
probably not in my lifetime.
I think you'll see a business model shift. Like you said, you're seeing more of it, especially in the South. You see a lot more of the counter service where it's real high quality food.
Yeah,
you have a queue. People stand, they order, they take either a buzzer or a table topper, and they have people running around running food. I mean, just change the business model.
The airports all do it now. You got a QR code and you order and
right. I think it was an initial shock to a lot of consumers not wanting to scan or whatever, but now I know people who prefer it.
Well, the pandemic trained people to, because they had to.
Right.
Right. And the same with takeout. Takeout obviously has jumped for every restaurant because of the pandemic, and it's pretty much hasn't stayed where it was, but it didn't go back down to where it was either. We have tablets, but we don't take the tablet to the table. We want our guests experiencing that face fronting employee, smiling and engaging, as opposed to doing this. And it's just a different feel.
Yeah.
I think in 20 years that's going to happen, where the younger generation this is what they do.
They'll be wearing a little thing that is like AI, and the AI will be listening, and they'll be like, "Here's the order." That will push to the POS, and before they even turn their back to the guest, they'll be, printing in the kitchen, and then you're just gonna run. Like that's like I think we have to start thinking like this is where future is going, like streamlining, or at least having, like the AI listening and placing the order, and then you look down, you verify, like it's like coming up, like populating on like the tablet as they're talking, and you just hit confirm send. Like that's where we are. Like the technology exists today for that. It's just a matter of somebody to think about piecing it together, and like it's there. It's a matter of time.
Yeah, and I just the boomers have the money, the Gen X have some money, the next two younger generations they don't have the money yet, so they're not going to drive that change just yet.
Yeah. As
they get older, then they'll have the money and they'll be able to drive that change of more tech involved in ordering and all that.
Yeah. In terms of tariffs, you mentioned the significance. Like why? Like what do we need to know relative to tariffs?
So, it doesn't affect. It doesn't affect our business model, but
your model meaning
our restaurants, but certainly there are restaurants that they get a tremendous amount from overseas, and certainly Mexico and even Canada. We buy our chairs from Canada, and so it's not going to affect us that much, but there are, just being at the association board meeting last week, some of the big chains are very concerned about it because they buy a significant amount from overseas.
Is that good for the independents? If it's getting harder for big chains?
Possibly.
Is that a bad thing? Where do you fall on that?
Not for me.
This has been a lot of fun. I've really been enjoying the conversation. I want to respect your time. Anything that we have not discussed that you want to have come up?
Well, it's actually a good segue to something that we're focusing on this year and moving forward. We had a long discussion just very specifically about the chains and even some local competitive independent groups. We do so much good things in our company. The product that we buy is some of the best. Like we buy prime steak tips. We don't shout that from the rooftops. There are things that we do that we know we are better than the competitors. So we're going to have a whole campaign this year and next year around We Are Better. We own the domain name, and we're going to train our staff to tell customers, to share with customers. We're going to have, obviously, things on the table. We're going to have things that are menu-driven, things on the web, but really get down to the nitty-gritty to explain to our customers, did you know that we buy our roasted coffee from Dover, New Hampshire? It's a local company in Dover. Did you know that we have a greenhouse in Salem, New Hampshire that our produce supplier built specifically for us to grow lettuce and cilantro and parsley and those are the kinds of things that we know internally, and we're going to start shouting it from the rooftops that we are better, because the chains can't do that. They can't.
Yeah, I think it's really smart of you. Honestly, are you familiar with the expression, the service in the entertainment economies, right? So Joe Pine, author of The Experience Economy, had him on the show to talk about the experience economy. In his thesis is that we're moving into the transformation economy. And actually, I'm going back and forth with him on email right now because I said, I'm really excited for your book, The Transformation Economy, to come out. And he's like, what role does the restaurant industry have in transforming people? And I'm like, literally everything. If you look at like food, like humans' like relationship with food, as far back as like anthropology and like history can show, like food has literally changed humans. Like we evolved alongside our ability to influence and get food. And if you think that's going to be any different going into the future, then I think the food industry is going to transform humanity and society going forward.
So it'll be interesting to see what RFK Jr. has on effect, right?
But when you think about the transformation, like we can literally transform communities with our influence of like purchasing locally. And I think as we go into the transformation economy, really what the transformation economy is, it's a bunch of single experiences stringed together over time to make people are much more conscious going to the future. They want their purchasing to make them feel good. The experience they get of knowing that like I'm putting better food into my body, I'm giving food to my friends and neighbors, and like I might be getting this chicken from Vernon Family Farm that costs $25, but I know what that farm is doing to do it holistically, and I know Jeremiah, and I want to give, like, if you have the choice to give your money to your friends and transform the life of your farmer, then that's going to make you eat that chicken and make this, it's going to feel better, right? I think there's definitely a trend of people being more conscious with their purchasing. And I think that if you tap into that consciousness of letting people know what we go through to support our community and to give you the best food for you and your body, do you don't think that's going to influence their purchasing decision?
Yes.
That's the transformation economy. And
that's what the We Are Better campaign is a small part of it. We're scratching into that we do buy better product than our competitors.
Yeah. And you should shout it from the rooftop, and that should be a differentiator. 100%. You should be rewarded for that, I think. This has been a lot of fun. A couple questions before we say goodbye for sure, or for official until the next 10 years. What is one thing about your business, a value, a process, a system that's truly uncommon and makes you unstoppable?
I know it's cliche, but it's our people that have been with us for so long, and they just understand our brand and they love our brand. We have generations of families that work for us.
Yeah.
I mean, I am so proud of that they welcomed in their high school daughter, son to become a busser or a host, and then they stay on, and then they grow up, and then we literally have 3 generations that have worked for our company.
Yeah. And I'm proud to be able to make an example. And like, my goal is get more Tom Bouchers out there in the world and to show how it's done, man. So thank you for doing the work. The mission statement is to change the world through inspiring, empowering, and transforming the industry. How have you personally transformed? I think we're going to transform the industry by transforming individual restaurateurs. So what is the biggest way you've evolved?
Personally?
Yeah.
I think I mentioned it, just advocating on behalf of the industry.
Yeah.
You know, I'm not afraid. I did a lot during the pandemic, a lot. I did a lot of national TV. I did a lot of local TV, just advocating for the industry in general.
Yeah.
That's something that I'm proud of, and I'm looking forward to continuing that engagement.
I'm going to say it now, so I don't forget to say it. If I can ever share my platform with you to get a message out, to advocate, I would love. Always welcome.
That's great to hear.
Yeah, please.
Awesome.
Never hesitate. If you got the if you got the news, you'd be leaving this world tomorrow. All the memories of you, your work, and your restaurants would be lost with your departure, with the exception of 3 pieces of wisdom that you could leave behind for the good of humanity and your legacy. What would those 3 pieces of wisdom be? This is a doozy question.
Woo. Be with the people that you want to be with, that make you happy, and surround yourself with people that make you happy. Like, don't get caught up in the drama. Don't let the negativity bring you down, because there's so much negativity out there, and find a way to get positive people in your circle.
Is that 1?
That's kind of 2.
Okay. So choose people, your relationships. Don't fall into the negative trap. What's 3?
Take care of your family.
This has been a lot of fun, Tom. Thank you so much. So I wrap up every chat by having my current guests call out a future guest. Who are people nationally or locally that you just really respect and admire? And if I were to sit in front of them and share their story and their knowledge, their perspective, they would absolutely add value to our listeners. Who comes to mind? I got to get Tinius on the show.
I'll tell you, Dawn Sweeney was the president and CEO for the National Restaurant Association for the entire time that I was there. She retired in 2019, at the end of 2019. She's an amazing, amazing leader for the industry. She brought the National Restaurant Association to a completely different level, and she's just a wealth of knowledge. She genuinely cares about this industry. She didn't come from the industry. She came from AARP. And she said so many times, you know, how incredibly dedicated this industry is. She's right. Restaurant owners are so incredibly dedicated to what they do. And she personifies that in what she did as the CEO. Yeah. She's fantastic.
Where's she based?
And I have her contact if you want to reach out to her.
Where's she based, you know?
She's from Maine originally. I think she's down in the DC area now.
I'll be driving through that area in a couple of weeks, so I'd love to make that happen. And in the first conversation, I think it's John Tinius.
John, yeah.
Yeah, you called him out. He's somebody I'd love to make that happen. I think he's got a lot of people between him and the media, so there's a lot of gatekeepers there. But I'd love to get that to happen if you could put a good word in for me.
Sure.
I'd love that. And how can we connect if we really enjoyed today's conversation? Maybe we want to come to a Copper Door or a T-Bones when we're out here. Social information. Maybe we want to come work for you because we've been inspired by what we had to share today.
Perfect.
What's the best way to connect?
Copperdoor.com, tbones.com.
And I'll have the social handles in there as well.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. All right, beautiful. This is where I say thank you so much for taking the time to share your story, your knowledge, your perspective, your values on your birthday. We've gone over time.
I can't believe we did it on my birthday last time, too. That's amazing.
Thank you so much, man. There is no questioning. You are unstoppable. Cheers.
Thank you.